In the UK, the problem of nightmare neighbours has never been worse.
This man's going to kill me.
Oi, you were assaulting me!
My husband had blood all over his face and I thought he was dead.
1 in 5 of us has been at war with next door.
The truth always comes out. Never forget that, scumbag.
Where flaring tempers can turn home life into a living hell.
I wouldn't spit on him if he was on fire.
Coming up, battling pensioners in the Scottish Highlands.
Nearly taking my head off and getting closer.
Murderous threats in Devon.
I'm gonna do you. You're dead.
And not everything in this garden is rosy.
And all of a sudden, he's at me like that.
When looking for an isolated, idyllic beauty spot, there couldn't be a better setting than rural Kinross near Fife in Scotland. In 1986, retired hotelier Terence Doyle and his wife Jean found the perfect home overlooking the stunning Loch Leven.
I refer to it as the tropics of Kinneswood. We get nice scenery from here and we're off the beaten track. I think in most of our lives we've lived in the country and enjoyed peace, quiet, tranquility and good views. And so we rather like it here.
14 years later, this wealthy pocket of the country attracted retired businessman David Poole and his wife, and they moved up from Berkshire to the bungalow next door.
My wife was adamant she did not want to look at pylons, and we happened to take one look at the view and decided, fantastic.
It didn't take long for the Doyles to extend the hand of friendship to their new neighbours.
We were the people that were doing the giving the approaches and inviting them for morning coffee and so on.
Yeah, when we first met Terry, perfectly friendly. We went to dinner with him and his family one evening. We had nothing in common.
Occasionally there would be a reciprocal to go to their place, but it was never like being at home.
For the next 10 years, the two families enjoyed a relatively harmonious relationship until 2010, when the construction of a new driveway by David would change things forever.
Initially, the boundary between the two properties would have followed that yellow line straight up there.
When David's workmen started on the drive, Terence was soon on the scene.
And I said, gentlemen, sorry if I'm ruining your day, but I don't know who you are and you're on my land and I don't know what you're doing, but I don't want anything done.
I freely admit I'd forgotten this 3-metre pathway, half of which was mine, half of which was his. I'd totally forgotten about that bit.
But David had a solution, so work on the driveway could continue.
I said, well, look, the guys are here. I'm going to need the drive, whatever. If I've encroached on your land, yes, I still need the drive. And you can have a slice of land in compensation.
They informally agreed on a land swap, and Terence set his sights on a slither of land in a field that ran behind both properties.
I would never have settled a deal in a handshake, but in the absence of any other means there and then, that was it. And then he reneges on that within a day or two.
I got to think about it. I said, you are asking for too much, Terry. You know. We eventually got to the actual plans and discovered that, in fact, I had not encroached in any way. So I said, deal's off.
That was disappointing.
The new driveway wasn't only a constant reminder of his lost land, there was another problem. As Terence's garage was to be a casualty of David's new construction.
They then slope it this way to make sure that everything that lands there shoots off. You could guarantee every day that it rained, the garage flooded. It was obvious he was not going to do anything about the water.
It's the natural slope of the land. I've done nothing. I believe the agricultural ruling on water runoff or flash floods and that sort of thing is that you have to handle the water that comes onto your land.
We had lived there since '86 and the garage was always tinder dry, always.
One day, When Terence saw David trying to nail his back gate shut, he went over to confront him.
I said, what's going on here? You can't have access to the field, he said. I said, I don't need access to the field. This is our piece of land right here. And he's got this 3-pound mash hammer in his hand. And he swung the mash hammer at me like so. And I kind of dodged that. You've got this grimace, and the teeth and the eyes popping again, and shades of, try that again, you're banded, and I'll really get you, you know. And it came again at me. Come on, I'm saying. And again, the mash hammer came at me. This was vicious, like that. And I said, you must be out of your tiny head.
He stated that you swung the hammer in his direction.
No, not true.
Terence called the police, but they decided not to take any action. But the situation soon started to take its toll on his wife, Jean.
I don't even feel safe with the doors locked because you don't know what that man's going to do next. You know, I keep saying to Terry, if this doesn't stop, this is going to kill us. And I mean that.
Coming up, threats and counter-threats in Devon.
And I said, if you do that, I'll kill you.
And shady goings-on in suburbia.
Just thought, what is this, gangster tactics? Is this gangster land now?
Nestling in the picturesque Devon countryside, the small village of Rowborough seemed like a dream setting for Tina and Steve Webb when they moved there in 1998 with their children Sarah, Charlene and Matthew.
It's beautiful because we've got obviously the moors further out, and that's why we wanted to move out this far. And we've got our local pub, which is very nice up there as well.
The neighbourhood in itself is absolutely great.
Yeah, it's like a proper old village, isn't it? Always saying aye, and you have a little yap and that, and then toddle on to do your day's work.
Finding themselves in such a close-knit neighbourhood, Tina decided to set up her own child minding business.
The house that we're living in is ideal for it, as we've got a very large garden, climbing frames and things like that for them.
Tina went to great lengths to make sure their house was secure for the children.
We bought the CCTV 10 years ago for child minding. And if the children was playing and fought, you know, if they fell, they would be able to, we'd have evidence of what happened. But recently we've had to use them for my neighbour up the road, the Browns.
In March 2008, Richard Brown and his partner moved in, just a few doors up from the Webbs. Stephen and Tina initially had no contact with them, but it would only be 3 weeks before things started to go wrong.
One day Charlene come running in the door, petrified actually, she looked quite shook up, that the man up the road, she said, was shouting and swearing at her. Richard Brown was stood on the end of the drive, shouting that he's got nowhere to park, and when I actually looked up by his area, he had his parking space there.
The Webbs had grown accustomed to parking at least 5 of their vehicles in the spaces in front of their house.
Steve heard the shouting and he come running down and said, what's going on? And Mr. Brown started shouting that he's fed up with the parking around here and he's had enough. So Steve said, oh, you know, don't talk to my wife and child like that again, like, you know. And he said, oh look, I'm so sorry, he said. Can we shake hands? I'm not in a happy mood. My son got injured in a boxing ring and it's quite upset me. He said, and I had no rights really to take it out on you, and can we shake hands and apologise? And so Steve said, well yeah, but next time you can speak to us in an appropriate manner.
The Webbs hoped that was the end of the matter, but it was their son Matthew who was to bring relations between the families to the boil.
Matthew went to get some shopping. On the way back, as Matthew approached outside the house, Richard Brown called him up.
I heard a lot of shouting and screaming. I looked out the window to see if that Richard Brown had had my son Matthew and was punching him around the head and around the face, really aggressive. Matthew was trying to hold his head down like that and push him away, and as Matthew was pushing away, Richard Brown was grabbing him more and punching him more to the face and head. He was punching him underneath, lifted his legs off the floor, really punching him. He was saying to Matthew, he said, I'm going to do you, I'm going to hammer you, and you're dead. And then I ran downstairs, ran out, and then as I ran at the front door, he threw him on the floor like a rag doll. I come out the house, because I seen Matthew being beat up, and by the time I got to this point, Matthew was on the floor by then. We tried to push Richard Brown, but he just didn't want to let go. He just wanted to punch. And I said, what are you doing? What's it all about? And he said, I just hate the and that's exactly what he said.
Richard Brown claims the fight was self-defence, when Matthew attacked him and made threats towards his family. Richard was cautioned by the police. Tina Webb felt there could have been other reasons for the fight.
He was just going on about Matthew. Matthew fancies his girlfriend. I said, no, that's not right. We don't even know your girlfriend. I called Matthew down because he was upstairs. And I said, Matthew, do you fancy this man's girlfriend? He said, no, I've never seen her. He said, I don't know what you're on about.
On Boxing Day of that year, relations between the two families reached a new low, when the Webb family were walking home from a night at the pub.
As we walked past the post box, coming down towards Richard Brown's house, he said, I'm going to smash your cars up, burn your house. He said, you'll be in bed one night and you'll burn to death with your family. And threatened me with all that. And I said, if you do that, I'll kill you.
Richard Brown denies the abuse and claims he called the police after he heard the Webb family shouting threats and seeing Matthew with a baseball bat.
Matthew had a baseball bat and he said, he's not going to hurt me again.
Matthew feared for himself.
And he had the bat to protect himself. And Charlene, my youngest daughter, said, he's not going to hurt you, and she grabbed him and she was feeling for him, and she brought him in, and the basketball bat went back in the car, and the police seized it from the car.
Richard Brown claims Tina also forced her way into their home. Matthew and Steve Webb were arrested and cautioned, though neither were actually charged.
It was just the heat of the moment, wasn't it? That was it. There was no fighting or anything.
The things we've retaliated to is through things they've made us retaliate to defend ourselves.
But that retaliation was soon to get out of hand again. In a Scottish beauty spot, two pensioners had locked horns in an ongoing battle over a disputed driveway. The row now spread to where the fence line should be.
We'd written letters to him saying, we're going to have to go to arbitration, aren't we? And we are saying here and now, if you fail to do this, we will remove the fences that we think are in the wrong position.
When he first started coming in the gate and telling us what to move, I was shocked that anyone could make these demands, that we had lived here all these years. Well, what can I say?
Gave him suitable time, and I started removing it.
And it didn't go unnoticed by his neighbour.
Mr. Doyle comes tearing up the drive at me.
And it was over here that he picked up a bracing bit. He was part bent and had a mean look, and he changed it from one hand to the other, and he was then trying to circle me. I could see that I was going to be getting the benefit of this just at any moment, and he would keep swapping and back again, and I reckoned it was actually coming for me. I was definitely going to catch it this time, when a neighbour stepped out and shouted, "Stop now." And he straightened up and he stood there thinking his day had been ruined.
He says that you came at him with the bracing bit.
It was a terrible experience, and I was glad that my neighbour came to my rescue. I don't think I might have been here today. This was definitely going for me.
Following the incident, Terence Doyle called the police, and this time David received a caution. It didn't take long for the two men to collide once again, and this time Terence accused David of deliberately parking his car to block access to his driveway.
They had the Volvo parked right here, When I called him to say, David, you've got your car parked down there, so what? And just as blocking our way.
I have parked once out there to make a point.
Sole purpose was to obstruct our access and entrance.
Guess what? The police come around and say, Mr. Dawes says you can't get out. Well, excuse me, if he hadn't got such stupid gates, he could use the full width of the drive to get in and out.
The Rolls goes out fairly frequently. It would have been a tight job for it to try and get in there. We were having a very important guest and meeting with us here. I was going to collect them and they would be joining us here for morning coffee or a late morning coffee, and we're then going for lunch.
Oh, I've got Lord so-and-so coming. Please leave your car out of the way so he can get his Rolls Royce in to join my Rolls Royce.
Luckily for Terence, the weekly bin collection forced David to move his car, and Terence seized his moment.
It was my intentions to fetch my bicycle and to park it here and to say, sorry, this spot is taken. I then had to put a nail through its pedal so that it couldn't blow over, and so it stood there, and it stood there for at least a week.
With the bicycle nailed firmly to the pavement, it was impossible for David to return his car to the same spot. Although Terence won the parking battle, the war was far from over. Rita Grutendorst and her husband Peter live in the suburb of Sidcup in southeast London.
I've lived here 20 years now, and I am well known, especially to the council, because I'm a community campaigner and a community activist.
And Rita is proud to stand out from the crowd.
I do think I'm very, very different from the kind of people who live here. I'm not like the other people who live in this street. So you're coming up to my house, so this is it. I'm sorry it's a mess.
Rita's a keen gardener, and unlike other residents in the neighbourhood, she likes to pack her garden with a rich variety of plants and shrubs.
I am a free spirit because I do love nature, and I do believe that the world is there for us to cherish, not to destroy.
Rita had lived here for 14 years, when in 2008, Paula Lote and her partner Derek Wood moved in next door. And according to Rita, the first time they met, Paula Lote offered to buy Rita's house.
And I said, oh, that's great. You know, if you pay me what you've paid for next door, I'll start looking. But nothing came of it. She sort of stiffened up when I said, if you pay me what you paid for next door, and that was the end of that forever. And sadly, things only went from bad to worse.
Soon after, Rita received a letter saying Paula Lote and Derek Wood wanted to build a 2-storey extension on their home.
I opposed the plans because if I had allowed the plans to go ahead, they would have built a bigger than average extension.
Due to Rita's objections, Paula Lote didn't receive permission to build her extension for over a year. By then, Paula changed her plans, deciding to modify her garden instead.
You know, I saw the lorry loads of decking arrive, and then they put decking and fencing right up against my house.
And Rita claims the installation of decking ruined the peace in her garden.
The nail gun, for a week, that's all I heard. It was unbelievable. Chung, 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 chung. There's just tons of decking.
Once the decking was finished, Rita wasn't impressed.
I noticed that the gap and my border that used to be there between my lean-to and next door, that had gone when they put their decking and moved the fence over. So I lost part of my garden straight away.
Rita claims that her neighbours moved the boundary fence right up against her conservatory wall, stealing several inches of her garden. This is something Paula Lote strongly denies.
When I said to her on the Sunday, excuse me, I'd like you to remove this fence and decking off my land, and she went, good luck with that.
But Rita was determined to stand her ground.
Maybe little, but I'm not a pushover. This is just piracy. I tried everyone, including the council and councillors, to try and help, and nobody wanted to help.
Rita and Peter decided to try and prove that Paula had stolen part of the boundary, so they asked a surveyor to visit their home and conduct a laser land survey.
So I've got the survey here, and it shows that there's at least an 8-inch gap. So this survey proved that they encroached with their fence into my property, which they treated as if it is nothing. But I find that it is just a land grab. So.
Paula Lote and Derek Wood deny ever moving the fence and insist it has been in the same position for at least 15 years, since before they moved in. But convinced a strip of their land had been stolen, Rita and Peter wrote a letter to Paula and Derek, outlining their grievances and including the results of their survey.
After I posted the letter, I just hoped that we could have a resolution and, you know, put an end to all the nonsense that had gone on. A couple of days later, after I posted the letter, I went to my letterbox, and there was an envelope with my letter torn up inside. Just thought, what is this, gangster tactics? Is this gangster land now? You know, it's intimidation. It's like a slap in the face.
Coming up, the police clamped down on Rita.
I've been sent to arrest you. Arrest me?
And Tina finds herself behind bars.
I was very scared. It's the first time that I was ever put in a cell that evening.
If your home life is sometimes a bit of a nightmare, our competition could really make a difference. We've got £10,000 to give away. Imagine what you could do with 10 grand. Maybe you could take the family away for a well-deserved holiday. Or perhaps it's time to spruce up your home and reclaim the garden from the wilderness. Whatever it is you need, Channel 5 wants to give you a helping hand. So for your chance to win, call 0904 161 9955 or text WIN to 85545 or post your name and phone number to WIN, PO Box 7557, Derby, DE1 0NP. Calls cost £1.53 from a BT landline. Calls from other landlines and mobiles may cost considerably more. Text costs £1.50 plus one message at standard network rate. Lines close at midday on the date shown on screen and 3 days later for postal entries. For rules, go to channel5.com/win.
Watering can at the ready.
In Sidcup, Rita grew endorsed to clash with her new neighbours, Paula Lote and Derek Wood, from the moment they arrived. And Rita claims they laid decking and moved the boundary fence 8 inches onto her land.
My garden's gone. The spirit of my garden has been taken away because I just feel they can do as they please. And they have done.
Paula Lote says that she once caught Rita trying to smash the boundary fence down with a hammer. Her partner Derek Wood made an audio recording of the argument that followed.
Rita, I've asked you to stop damaging my fence.
I've asked you to get it off my land.
Rita, it's been there
Stop
for 15
stealing
years.
my land. Stealing, cheating,
How
and
have
lying.
I damaged
You've
or
lied
moved
and
your
lied
fence?
and lied. Oi, get it off my land.
But it wasn't just the alleged land grab that disturbed Rita. After 3 years of conflict, one spring morning Rita heard Derek trimming the shrub that divides their front gardens.
So I go outside to tell him, stop that. Then saw my diverter pipe lying there on his ground.
Paula Lote claims Derek was merely repairing the dam pipe, which is shared between the two properties.
He's going, oh, I'm videoing this. And I said to him, why have you stolen my diverter pipe? Give that back. Give it back now. If you won't put it back and won't give it back, I'm going to get it.
2 doors down, neighbour Jerry Wooder was working in his back garden when he heard shouting.
Most of it was coming from Rita, yelling at Derek. It's not the first time I've known her to sort of moan about these things.
Went to take my diverter pipe, and all of a sudden, before I can even reach the pipe, he's at me like that, at me like that, and I'm flat on my back. and he's on top of me and I can't get up. I'm trying to pull myself up, I can't get up.
I saw that they were struggling and he pushed her on the ground. She tried to get up, was pushing quite hard and fiercely on to keep her down, and she hit her head a couple of times. So I jumped over and pulled him off.
He just ripped this chap off me, who was on top of me, and got me away.
And that was it. It obviously quietened down. And I came back out here again when I saw Derek, and we were here, just here, when he said the ladies just attacked me. And he had this cut on his face.
Their video of the alleged fight no longer exists, but Paula Lote and Derek Wood insist that it was Rita who had attacked Derek. And shortly after the clash, Rita got a knock at the door.
And I went downstairs and there was a young policewoman and a man standing there. And I said, "Oh, thank God you've come. I thought you were never going to come and do the investigation." She said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry, we haven't come to investigate. I've been sent to arrest you." And I went, "You're having a laugh. Arrest me?"
Paula Lote claims police told her Rita behaved like a wild animal when she was arrested. After 12 hours at the police station, Rita was charged with assault and criminal damage and released on bail. She was due in court the following month, but the charges against her were dropped because of a lack of evidence.
It's a malicious prosecution. If there's no evidence and you haven't done anything, it's a wrongful arrest and a malicious prosecution.
But Paula Lote maintains that Derek suffered cuts during the attack. Their neighbour Jerry Wooder has his own views on the situation.
Well, I think the run-ins that people have had, they've actually learnt that it's not worth really chasing these things or making too much of an issue. Just walk away from it. Here's a lady who could create hell for you if you're not too careful.
For Rita, it's her garden that has suffered the most.
I used to have a working, flourishing garden, but I don't use this garden. I can't use the garden as I used to use it before these people arrived and started all the tricks. My garden now has not seen me for 2 years. I just have lost heart.
So in a final attempt at peace, Rita proposed that Paula and Derek pay her £5,000 to compensate for the loss of the land.
This is not a perfect solution. It would not make up for what I've gone through, but £5,000 would at least pay for my laser land survey and all the hassle. It would go a little tiny way to pay for what she's done. I'd like her to be reasonable. I'd like her to be a good neighbour, if that's possible.
Rita and Peter are currently awaiting a response from Paula Lote. But it seems unlikely that Rita and her surrounding neighbours will ever see eye to eye.
Well, she's certainly eccentric, there's no doubt about that. If she quietly just got on with things, then things would be very peaceful. Because I think this is a quiet street, it's neighbourly. I wouldn't actually put her into how you would describe neighbourly.
I couldn't care less about these neighbours. They're not my sort. They're not my type. Unfortunately, I've never had good neighbours in this road. It's full of zombies. It's full of inbred village idiots.
In Kinross, the last 4 years has seen Terence Doyle and David Poole embroiled in a row over a slither of land that ran behind both properties. Once promised to Terence in exchange for part of his driveway, David and his wife had then withdrawn the offer, but Terence still believed it was his.
I would say it has hijacked our lives because Terry can think of nothing else. I'd just like it to end. I really would like it to end. I'd really like him to move away and go wherever he can and give the rest of the people, the neighbours here, peace.
But peace wasn't on the cards. When Terence decided to do some improvements to his house and left an old fireplace on the disputed land, things were about to get violent.
We heard that box go whomp.
Whilst Terence believed the old fireplace was on his property, David believed it was on his, and tempers quickly flared.
He then said, did you push the firebox over? I said, yes. Why did you do that? I said, it displeased me.
And he looked over his shoulder and came there in one move right around, teeth glaring, and got me with his vicious left hook.
Next I knew, I had a thwack in the back. Probably a kick.
There was only one hit, just one hit in the whole session, where he actually got me in the side of the head. Suddenly I'm caught from behind by his glove fist under my throat. He puts his leg behind me to unbalance me, and he whumps me onto the ground with all his force. And it's not as though I fell onto a feather mattress. I've fallen onto all these branches and bits of wood and such, and they're not very comfortable.
I defend myself as best I can. I end up on the ground. He ends up here. His glasses like this. Sorry, like that. Looking a bit stunned.
Once again the police were called, and Terence was taken to hospital for his injuries.
Where's this cracked skull and displaced jaw? I don't know what else, you know. Burst his eyelids or something, did I? Burst his eardrums.
It's not that he would go up there and want to fight with someone. He's never fought with anyone, but he has.
Lies, lies, lies.
The police charged David with assault, but when the case went to court, he was found not guilty. Though according to the sheriff, neither man was acting in a manner fitting to his age.
I worry for Terry, for his sanity, frankly, with this man, to be told that he hit him first. And I keep saying to Terry, give him what he wants and let's get on with our lives. What do we need it for?
But the men felt differently, and to avoid any further unwelcome encounters, David took advantage of a Scottish law which stops people from trespassing on your land.
I bought the caravan because you cannot legally enter someone else's property if there's a caravan on that enclosure.
The caravan remained on the field, but not for long.
One night in January, and it was pouring with rain, I'm told, and it ended up a pile of junk.
Who will be the number one suspect now? You know, what next? Am I to be blamed for sort of thing?
Neither the police nor the fire brigade were able to prove if the blaze was accident or arson.
What do you think happened?
I think somebody set light to it.
I can assure you I had nothing to do with the burning down of that caravan, nothing whatsoever.
To this day, it remains a mystery, but the fiery feud between the two men was far from over. The rural calm of Roborough in Devon was shattered when Steve and Tina Webb came into conflict with their new neighbour, Richard Brown. A destructive chain of events had already been set in motion. The Browns complained to the police about Tina's son Matthew's treatment of their teenage son. At the same time, Tina received reports from Ofsted about anonymous complaints regarding her childminding business.
There are ongoing issues regarding this family with the police. Their language is disgraceful in the presence of the minded children. Frequently displayed aggravation and threatening behaviour towards their neighbour. I do think he is attacking us through Ofsted's, and anybody knows Ofsted's is the people you've got to answer to.
Then the police paid Tina a visit.
They wanted us to take our CCTV cameras down because it was not right for the Browns. They felt intimidated in their privacy, and they said it's not right that you've got the camera going up towards their property.
Tina moved her cameras, but soon both families were lodging complaints about the other to the police. Tina claimed Richard was harassing her at her door, and his partner had damaged her car. Richard says Tina was constantly harassing his family, and he had evidence. Both families deny the other's claims. Finally, Tina was issued with a police information notice in relation to allegations of harassment, warning her to have no direct or indirect contact with the Browns. But then in February, she discovered a Facebook post by Richard's partner.
2 complaints and 1 enforcement action letter. Tut tut, they must have plenty of haters. Ha ha. So then she's put, this has made my day. Whoop whoop whoop, yippee.
Tina couldn't help herself and took to Facebook to post a very public response. Ignoring her police information notice, she wrote on Richard's partner's Facebook wall and messaged her online friends.
I did say that they are a nasty family because of what we've had to go through. I couldn't believe what happened next.
Within a few hours, there was a knock at the door.
It was 2 police officers asking for Tina Webb, and they just come right through to the kitchen at me, and I said, what do you want me for? What have I done? And they said, we've come to arrest you. I was very scared. It's the first time that I was ever put in a cell that evening, and I was sat there for 5 hours wondering what I've done.
Tina was not charged for the online posts, but instead, the courts upheld the Browns' complaints that she had actually verbally abused them on several occasions. Tina was convicted for harassment and was issued with a restraining order.
I was given a 2-year suspended sentence to stay away from Richard and his family. If not, I would get anything up to 5 years imprisonment. And I was given 50 hours community service. I had the tag around my ankle, which was on here, for 2 months. 7 o'clock in the evening, I had to be in, and I wasn't allowed out until 7 o'clock in the morning. So I was just like a prisoner in my own home, really. Couldn't even go to an Halloween party with my grandson.
Coming up, there's no end in sight for the Battle of the Borders.
He's Lord Doyle, who can bully anybody. Not me, mate.
Don't forget about your chance to boost your bank account by a massive £10,000. You could take a family holiday or spruce up your home. It's completely up to you. To enter, call 0904 161 9955 or text WIN to 85545 or post your name and phone number to WIN, PO Box 7557, Derby DE10NP. For rules, go to channel5.com/WIN. In Kinross, the Doyles and the Pauls have been locked in a bitter land dispute for the last 4 years that's put one in hospital and the other in court. To stake his claim to the disputed driveway once and for all, Terence had a trick up his sleeve.
We've simply marked the boundary and reminded a certain party as to whose boundary it is and where it is.
I was away and was informed that the spike had appeared. So I said, well, okay, we'll sort it out when we get home.
He's tried every trick. You've seen him with his little bottle jack trying to jack it out, and he had an engineer in to cut it out, and the engineer was stood right there, and I said, I'll just wait until you actually damage the galvanised metal on it, and then I'll go call the police. The guy unplugged his little Black & Decker and went.
He's Lord Doyle, who can bully anybody. Not me, mate.
It stops him from driving up here and parking here. It stops him from driving. He sometimes has 4 or 5 cars parked in the field where they're all looking on at us. Not that we pay any attention. I don't know where he gets them from or how he gets people to come and stay with him, but he's a very unsociable guy.
David was now hoping a civil court case would be the solution.
Look, I'm putting it in the hands of a specialist and a court, because all this argy-bargy is getting absolutely nowhere. Where should the boundaries be? Nobody can tell me.
But finding these answers wasn't cheap.
We're very close to £50,000 cash that we have given to this to keep this man from coming in here and taking our land that we have occupied since we bought this home and had no reason to doubt it at any time because the fences were all here when we came.
The final court hearing has not taken place, and the bitter feud continues to this day.
We bought and paid for this. If I got careless and let it all slip, I mean, I have a son and we have nephews and nieces. Are they more entitled to it than Poole is? I would think so.
The intrinsic land value is nil. I'm fighting it because it's not right.
I'd just like it to end. I really would like it to end. I'd really like him to move away and go wherever he can and give the rest of the people, the neighbours here, peace.
In Devon, what started as a neighbourhood dispute and bad feeling between two young men resulted in childminder Tina Webb receiving a restraining order for harassment. But Tina was soon struggling to meet the conditions of that order.
One day I was driving in the village and the children start waving and I started beeping and waving back and like laughing. And the next thing I get told that I broke my breach of harassment because I was doing this. Richard Brown phoned up and said that he felt intimidated because I was beeping and laughing in my vehicle whilst passing his house.
In April 2013, she was summoned on 4 counts of breaching her restraining order.
If I do anything to Mr. Brown again, I've only got to shout to Steve at the front, and if he thinks it's for him,
and he feels threatened,
and he feels threatened by it, then I'll be took to court and put to prison for up to 5 years.
In October 2013, a judge at Plymouth Crown Court disposed of the case, and Tina was bound over to keep the peace. The bad feeling between the Webbs and Richard Brown continued to simmer, and 9 months later, Steve received an alarming voicemail.
It's on my phone here.
Hello there, Mr. Webb, this is Mr. Brown. I'd just like to ask you a question as to why you're videoing my 11-year-old daughter on the way to school this morning. As you can imagine, she was very upset by this, and I'd like to know why exactly you're doing that. Thank you very much.
That evening, I was in my van, and Richard Brown come up to me and put his hands up against the door, which made me very uncomfortable and very nervous. I said, I've not done nothing, I don't want to talk to you, go away from me. He said, I want you to come out here because I'm going to kick your head in. And I said, just go away. He said, no, come out here. He said, because I'm going to do you right now.
The Webbs reported the incident to the police, and Richard Brown, who denies the harassment in the van, was issued with his own police information notice.
I'm glad it's being done, but it should have come a lot sooner.
With both families receiving police notices, things quietened down on the street. The police offered the families mediation, but the Webbs walked out. Richard Brown told us he has always been willing to solve the dispute amicably, even though they have been seriously affected by the harassment, and the Webbs have caused his family immense stress. Following the 6-year dispute, the Webb family's lives have also changed forever.
We shut the business down basically because of all the aggravation we've had. There's only so much you can take before breaking point, to be honest.
Next time, neighbours clash on a Glasgow estate.
He started running down that garden path, frothing at the mouth.
A garden wall in Wiltshire gets the makeover from hell.
It stands out like an eyesore. It's almost like seeing the Great Wall of China from the moon.
And a conservatory starts a boundary war in Bedfordshire.
I wouldn't spit on him if he was on fire. There isn't a swear word strong enough.
That's pretty strong. Tomorrow night on Channel 5, the effect of payment caps and the bedroom tax in Benefits, Babies and Jail at 8 o'clock. But next tonight, a nightmare for any business facing the repossession guys. New Can't Pay Will Take It Away follows the news headlines in just a moment.
Loving thy neighbour is easier said than done.
If he was a slug, I would put salt round him so he explodes.
They nearly got me arrested. That's the type of noise we have to park with.
When the garden fence marks enemy lines.
Have you got your recorder on?
That's right. Really?
Your home life can turn into a living hell.
Give me my dog!
What a minute of you? What the hell's the matter with you?
Coming up, wheelie bin wars turn nasty.
They were trying to cause trouble.
I thought it was very petty and childish.
Noise sparks off a war between two families.
I'm like a nervous wreck.
And ends in violence.
He's pushed Nathan to the point where he just wants to beat him up.
And one man is driven out of his neighbourhood.
Police, I'm being intimidated by my neighbours.
In a small mining village in South Wales lives 21-year-old Paige Jones.
This is Aberdeen. I've been brought up here and this is where I'm living. It's a very nice area. The community is friendly and everybody gets along.
Paige lives with her 3-year-old son in a house that has been in her family for 3 generations.
I'm very comfortable living in this house. My nan was brought up in this house.
And her father Gary lives nearby.
Me and my father get along really well. Not only is he my father, he's like my best friend. When we see one of us, there's another one always chasing behind.
4 years ago, Paige got some new neighbours. Joanne Dowling and her children. Joanne has agreed to speak to us, but has asked not to be shown.
When I first moved in, I thought it was a quiet street and that people were friendly. I never really had much to do with Paige at all. She's a very shy person. I don't think she bothered with many neighbours in a friendly way.
For 3 years, the neighbours didn't speak to each other. But one day, something very unfriendly happened that forced them to talk.
I'd been out on a Friday night for a few drinks, got back to the house about 8 o'clock in the morning. So I walked from the car which was parked down there, up to the house, only to find my front door kicked in.
I was down my mother's and I received a phone call off my father early in the morning. I said, "Dad, what's wrong?" And I could tell by his voice he was very angry. And then he described to me then that his front door had been put in.
The large footprint on there, fingerprints all over the door.
This front panel here was kicked in so far, I could see all the upstairs. I was very shocked because it's been kicked with a lot of force.
The Jones were at a loss to explain why this had happened. Could it have been a burglary, a drunken local, or something more personal?
No idea who could have done it. The street has been so quiet over the years, and obviously to see that is rare for you.
Suspicion soon fell on the newcomer, Joanne.
I checked Joanne's Facebook account on that day and she had put a status saying, "Party with the big boys."
Paige put 2 and 2 together and decided the damage must have been done by drunken party guests.
My father knocked her door to say, "Did you have a party here?" And she denied it. My father said, "Well, how come it says on Facebook?" But she denied having any party whatsoever.
I had 2 guests here. We drank 2 bottles of wine between the 3 of us, and I watched them leave here that night to go and get a taxi at the end of the street. It was nothing to do with us at all. Just absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
And that wasn't the only rubbish Joanne thought was coming from her neighbours, because she had her own complaints about them.
The bin was being put out and being left out 7 days a week in the curb directly outside my house. It was stopping me from parking outside my house, and Paige was able to park her car outside her house with no obstruction.
Gary does in fact leave the bins on the road. He has good reasons.
I used to leave the wheelie bin up against the wall by her, but it was causing damage and it's taking the paint away. So I decided then, rather leave it where here to cause more damage, I'd put it in the corner here. No one uses that, no one parks there, so I thought it'd be out everyone's way, really.
Paige's bin was taking up the parking space, and I would move the bin back outside of Paige's house and pull my car in. The next morning,
times I woke up to take my son to school. I've opened the front door here. As I stepped out, and basically we're on top of the wheelie bin as the bin has been placed on the doorstep here.
To stop Joanne moving their wheelie bin back outside their house, Paige resorted to a new tactic.
I woke up one morning and my daughter said to me, "You'll never guess what they've done to their bin. Come and have a look." They had covered the bin in thick builder's grease with a sign on it saying, "Do not touch."
The grease was put on the wheelie bin handles to stop the bin being moved from the road, and the sign was put on the bin to say hands off, so you know not to touch. Basically that's it.
If it had got onto my children's clothing, or if I had brushed up against it or my car, it would have been very difficult to have removed. They were trying to antagonise me. They were trying to upset me. They were trying to cause trouble.
But this bin war was only just beginning. Coming up, complaints about loud music lead to violence.
I'm so scared because I've been home alone. I didn't know what he's going to do next.
And a car obsessive drives his neighbours mad.
There's a banging on the door, and he gets his hands and pushes me back really violently.
Sometimes arguments between neighbours can be over in a flash, but others can burn on and on. In the West Midlands, the Sang family have been at war for 6 years.
Jamie! I can hear some music!
Since a noisy neighbour tipped them over the edge.
Yeah, the whole family just feel anxious and frustrated.
He's pushed Nathan to the point where he just wants to beat him up.
Mom, can we watch something nice, or maybe a horror film? Divorced Mom, Adele.
Nathan and Susan Sang live with their 2 sons, 18-year-old Kieran
I want to watch something nice.
and 19-year-old Jamie in Tipton in the West Midlands.
Annabelle?
Annabelle's not nice.
Annabelle's nice? All you see is like a doll moving about killing people?
When the dispute with their neighbours began, the family were dealing with their own problems.
I get my blood pressure. Yeah. About 6 years ago, my kidney deteriorated, and my consultant said that I will need a kidney transplant.
She began getting weak. She couldn't do things on her own. It was pretty heartbreaking because obviously it's your mum. You never want to see her like that.
With Susan in need of a donor, husband Nathan immediately stepped forward.
I mean, at the beginning, when he wanted to give me a kidney, I was very hesitant because I didn't want someone to risk their lives for me. It was a success. My kidney just started working straight away.
When they returned home from hospital, what Susan and Nathan needed was peace and quiet and lots of sleep. But that wasn't exactly what they got.
It was in 7 o'clock in the morning, and then suddenly we just hear some banging noise.
Oh God, it was bang, 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 and the radio was on.
It was really loud, even with all the window and door shut. I was so annoyed. I just get up myself and see what's going on outside.
Concerned that Susan, who was resting in bed, would be unable to get any much-needed sleep, Nathan decided he had to say something.
I see the next door neighbour out there in his back garden doing the groundwork with a radio next to him, and I tried to tell him can you turn the music down a bit?
But his neighbour, Babinder Singh, had his own ideas.
He came back yelling at me, very, very, very aggressively.
He goes, "Come down here and have a fight with me." That's what he said to Nathan.
I was really shocked, so I just shut the window.
But Mr. Singh wasn't the Sang's only problem, because his grown-up son Nick liked even louder music.
The first time when we heard a little bit of music, like a little beat.
While you were in bed?
Yeah, about 11 o'clock at night. And I thought, oh God, where's it coming from? So I come out onto the landing, and that's when I felt the vibration on the floor. It never really worried me, because, you just think it might be just a one-off.
But it happened again. And again, and again.
The music is that loud. It was like having a big disco in your house, yeah.
I just felt like going out and telling him, turn down your music.
And we had all the windows changed because of him. We thought, if we have triple glazing, it might help a little bit as well. But we can still hear it.
The family wanted to resolve things amicably and tried to speak to Nick on several occasions.
I was trying to be friendly with him. You don't follow your neighbours, do you? Do you know what I mean?
The Sangs say there was no let-up in the noise.
It was just putting so much strain on us, and it was to that point where most of the whole family had just fallen out.
We approached Nick and asked him for his version of events. He told us that whilst he does enjoy listening to music, he doesn't think it's too loud. And in April 2014, he asked Susan to go round and discuss the issue, face to face.
We were talking for about 2 hours. He goes, I'm really, really sorry for putting you through all that stress and you having your kidney problems and all that. And when I left his house, I really thought that, everything should be all right. I was really hopeful.
But before long, Nick's dad would ensure her high hopes would come crashing down.
He was that drunk. He was wobbling all over the place, just screaming and yelling. So what I'd done was, I was so scared being home alone, called the police. I didn't know what he was going to do next.
In Wales, Paige and Gary Jones were locked in a bitter feud with their neighbour, Joanne Dowling, over the positioning of their bin in the road outside her house.
I felt it was very unfair for her to obstruct my part of the highway.
The Joneses' wheelie bin was moved around the street for about 8 months before the council intervened.
All of a sudden, we had a letter from the council saying no one is allowed to leave a bin on the pavement or the road until the day your rubbish had to be collected. So we need to move the bins in, otherwise we'd be fined.
But this new arrangement didn't suit the Joneses.
My father weren't willing to put the wheelie bins through the house due to unclean carpet, which meant our wheelie bin got taken away. And after that, we've had to store our food and rubbish in the kitchen. I'm not happy about that because my son's only 3 and what happens if he falls and cuts himself on a tin?
With the rubbish piling up in the kitchen, the Joneses felt there was only one place to put their overflow.
I went to bring my bin in and noticed that the bin felt a bit heavy and the lid was open slightly.
My sister and I just came back from cleaning up from my brother's birthday party. My sister still had the birthday cake. Because no longer us having a wheelie bin, my sister used Joanne's wheelie bin next door.
I opened up the bin and noticed inside there was a silver cake tray with a cake on it. So I thought, it's not my cake and I know whose cake it is, so I put it on her doorstep.
I seen the cake had been placed back on the doorstep. I thought it was very petty and childish, as I don't see no harm in using someone's wheelie bin to dispose of a cake.
Paige's stepsister Layla had left the cake in Joanne's bin, so Paige got straight on the phone to her.
I said the cake had been put back on the doorstep. My sister then came over and knocked Joanne's door to see what the problem was in using her wheelie bin.
Paige's sister was very aggressive. I opened the door and received a tyrant of screaming abuse.
They had a few words. My sister then put the cake down by this blue arrow here.
Paige's stepsister kicked the cake at my house. I picked up the cake and threw the cake back to them.
As I closed the door, I heard a thud. Went all over the wall here and still marked.
I didn't want the cake outside the front of my property. It was their cake. They were having it back.
Paige's sister declined to comment on these events, but the cake was just the start of more serious problems. In the quiet Suffolk village of Little Waldingfield, one man has unwittingly become notorious.
Don't know him.
Ian Parker began renting a home in the village with his wife and 3 children 7 years ago.
Lovely little village. Everybody would speak to you. We were very happy. Got on with everybody and we were most welcome.
But since he arrived, Ian's certainly made an impression on the neighbours.
Ian's friendly to your face, but he's a troublemaker.
He's just got a bit of a reputation as a sort of loose cannon, as somebody who you wouldn't really want to have living next door to you or in your village.
But Ian was oblivious to what others thought of him and settled into his routine driving to and from work every day.
As I was indicating to pull into the driveway, which was a shared driveway at the time, this car, 2 cars behind us, speeding past them, overtaking, and to avoid him hitting me, I had to drive into the driveway quickly.
It had been a close shave, but Ian thought it was the end of the matter.
I turned the kettle on, and there's a banging on the door, surprise, and so I go back out.
It was Ian's next-door neighbour, and it was clear from the banging something was wrong.
I open the door, and he barges in, and he gets his hands and pushes me back really violently, and I fall to the floor. And starts shouting at me, "What you coming on the driveway like that for?" And so I got up, and I grab his collar, twist it, and I push him back out through the door. I said, "Don't you dare come to my bloody house like that." And he walks off with his tail between his legs.
It was clear his next-door neighbour was upset by his speedy arrival into the drive.
I'd done nothing to warrant a response like that.
But one of Ian's other neighbours, who doesn't want to be identified, claims he's got form.
He's had a couple of incidents in the street where he's had an altercation with another driver. He's spun his car around, wheels screeching in the road, and he would speed in the village. But that's just a matter of opinion. But I'd say he drives too fast.
Ian insists he's a safe driver and has his suspicions his neighbour was unhappy with something else.
He didn't like the fact that we had a shared drive, and he wanted his own driveway and me to have my own driveway.
Ian may have been right, as shortly afterwards the landlord decided to put up a fence splitting the drive in 2. But Ian had his own worries.
My wife left me. I was pretty down, as you can imagine. So I didn't need any more aggravation, hostility. Certainly didn't need hostility.
Ian tried to distract himself by focusing on his hobby.
This is my pride and joy, my Chrysler.
But then he started noticing problems with his cars.
And as I walked around this side of the car, I noticed there was a large spatter of mud here. It couldn't have happened while I was driving because the spatter itself was directly down. I immediately looked at my other vehicles and noticed the stone chip on my Transit, and on closer inspection found more scratches down the other side of my van. And discovered this chip here.
Ian was convinced someone had a grudge against him.
I was very upset about that. I felt obviously that was just a blatant attack on my property. So I phoned the police.
With no evidence as to the possible culprit, the police could do nothing. So Ian decided to take action to see if anyone was coming near his beloved cars.
Installed cameras front and back of the house.
Ian soon became a one-man surveillance machine.
I bought a torch cam, visible clip-on cameras, a tie cam, several button cams. So all my cars have car cams in. Probably spent about £500 to £700. I thought, well, I'm going to have to get evidence.
Coming up, the Sangs find peace doesn't last for long.
His dad came out the house and started screaming and yelling and looked up at me.
And Paige Jones's dad fights back.
He wouldn't touch a woman or hurt a woman.
In the West Midlands, Susan Sang had suffered noisy neighbours ever since her kidney transplant 6 years ago. Nick Singh, who lived next door, had apologised, and Susan enjoyed peace and quiet for 2 weeks. But that tranquility was broken one day when she was home alone.
All of a sudden I heard this loud music coming into the house. So I rushed into the bathroom, I looked out the window, and all of a sudden his dad came out the house and started screaming and yelling and then looked up at me. He was that drunk, he was like wobbling all over the place. So what I'd done was, I was so scared because being home alone, I quickly went and picked up the phone and called the police. I didn't know what he was going to do next.
While waiting for the police to arrive, Susan spotted another neighbour in the street and asked him to try and calm Nick's dad down.
And next thing I know, they were screaming and yelling, and Nick's dad was just going mad. And then Nick's dad went onto the middle of the road over there, and he stood there with his 2 arms outstretched and told him to run him over. It's just horrible,
The other neighbour continued to try and calm Balbinder down until the police finally arrived.
Next thing we know, he says something like bastard, and then the police put the handcuffs on him and put him in a police car and then took him away.
Balbinder was arrested for being drunk and disorderly. The next day, he was given a fixed penalty notice and released. But the Sangs hoped his brush with the law would finally keep him and Nick quiet, giving Susan the peace she needed to recover from her kidney transplant.
Oh, what is it?
36.4.
But 6 years of worrying about next door was beginning to take its toll on Susan.
I'm dreading it. Don't know whether he's going to put his bloody music on again. I wouldn't say a little bit taking over my life. I would say it's completely taken over my life. I can't even sit down, I can't even do nothing. As soon as this music comes on, I'm like a nervous wreck. Jimmy, come out, I can hear something.
That was when my mum was starting to actually get kind of, not crazy, but more insane over it.
All I hear is wind. You okay, Mum?
It's always in my mind. As soon as I wake up, as soon as I go to sleep, even during the day, I have this thought in my head thinking, oh my God, is it ever going to end?
So Susan took her complaints to the council, who provided her with noise monitors to record the levels of sound coming from next door.
That week I recorded it and they said there was enough evidence to serve a notice. It was that loud.
The council served Nick with a noise abatement notice, warning him that if he continued playing loud music, he could receive a fine. But Susan claims that within weeks, the problems had started up again.
I heard all this music coming through in my kitchen while I was cooking. I couldn't put my coat on and I went over and I was knocking and knocking for about 5 minutes, and I thought, well, it's not going to come now, is he, because he can't even hear me knocking maybe. So I thought I'll go home.
But Susan's banging hadn't gone unnoticed. 2 weeks later, she and Nathan were having dinner when they were interrupted.
Someone knocked on the door really hard, and it's like, just keep going until I answer the door. I was worried. He was quite aggressive.
The man at the door said he was a member of Nick Singh's family. He was angry that Susan had broken the door with her banging.
He goes, do you want trouble? He said to me. Nathan was about to go up and beat him up. But I said, no, don't go up there.
I said to him, if you not move, I'll call the police. And I just slammed the door.
It's not nice to be threatened. I was scared. What if they tried to do something? Do you know what I mean? It was horrible.
When we spoke to Nick and his family, they collectively decided not to take part in this film, and Nick didn't comment on this incident either. But Susan and Nathan had had enough. One more run-in with their neighbour would finally tip them over the edge.
We've given him so many opportunities to change his ways. We're not being jokey with him, we're not playing around, we're being serious.
In Wales, a row between the Joneses and their neighbour Joanne Dowling over the disposal of a birthday cake in the wrong bin had resulted in them hitting the headlines.
I was so upset because I didn't see a problem in using a wheelie bin, as everybody's entitled to use a bin to dispose of any rubbish. Everybody knows me as Quiet Paige, and I didn't put a cake in a bin to cause any trouble.
Joanne called the police, and Paige was ordered to clear the cake up, but it wouldn't end there.
On the Sunday morning, my father went to Joe's house just to say enough's enough.
As I opened the door, Gary lunged towards me. He scrammed all my neck. He ripped my top open and was trying to push me into the living room. I was screaming for him to get out. His words were inaudible. He had been drinking heavily, could smell it on him. My boyfriend got up and he came running down the stairs. "Come on then, I'll take the lot of you on." I was in the middle of it. I was the one that got kicked.
It was a serious allegation, and one that Gary didn't want to talk to us about.
He got arrested. I didn't approve of the way he got handled or spoken to, as it was out of order.
Gary was arrested for common assault and was released on bail, but not allowed to return to the street.
He wouldn't touch a woman or hurt a woman, and everybody we've spoken to has said, no way would you have done such a thing. There was no hard evidence against my father.
In court, the assault charge was dropped, but Gary did plead guilty to threatening behaviour, a public order offence.
He had a 10-week curfew, which means he has to wear a tag for 10 weeks. And also I've got a 3-year restraining order.
Gary didn't want to speak to us about the events in Joanne's house that day, but he did say he found the punishment very harsh. As part of the order, he has to stay in his own home between the hours of 9 p.m. to 8 a.m, limiting his time with Paige and her son.
He's got to sleep elsewhere, which has really gone hard on me and my father, as we're always together, and after all this we've been parted and we feel like we've lost limbs.
It needn't have gone this far. It's over a wheelie bin and a birthday cake, a very, very petty squabble.
But the war is far from over.
My wing mirror has been ripped off I don't know how many times. I have thought of moving in the not too distant future.
In Suffolk, neighbours of car enthusiast Ian Parker were far less enthusiastic about his collection of vehicles. Believing someone was trying to tamper with them, Ian had set up cameras.
I started to find screws strewn across in front of me van and my cars. In my back garden I found broken glass.
However, Ian wasn't able to find any evidence on his CCTV footage.
And then I started doing some maintenance on my van and cut my hand on the fence. Started bleeding straight away profusely. That was when I noticed the screws protruding through the wood that hadn't been there previously. Despite all my efforts, I was holding it up, I was putting pressure on it. I couldn't stem the flow of blood, so I called a paramedic.
The paramedic managed to stop the bleeding, and although he had no evidence, Ian was convinced the screws had been placed there deliberately. Ian checked his CCTV again and again and again, but there was no footage of anything untoward happening on his driveway. Then, one day, the cameras captured something. It was Ian himself with a friend working on his classic car.
I received a letter from the council. It said that there'd been complaints about excessive smoke pollution and excessive revving of car engines for over an hour and a half at a time. I started my car. Obviously, it's trying to burn off the excessive brake fluid in the carburetors. And of course, consequently, you get white smoke. You can see clearly my friend and I thought it was, humorous.
Ian was convinced he'd done nothing wrong, so he invited an environmental health officer round to view the footage.
And, we had a nice chat. And I said, well, for starters, as a classic car, I will not rev the engine in a classic car. He viewed the footage, and he asked me, he said, is this the only time this happened? And I said, yeah. And he recorded it as just a tad over 20 minutes.
The council took no action, but warned Ian that if the complaints continued, then he would be monitored. But it wasn't just engine noise that was bothering the neighbours.
A lot of heavy bass is played, mainly in his car. He'll have the windows open and it'll be blaring full pelt. It's like you get the boom, 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 that sort of music. You can hear it sort of down the road from where he lives. It is very loud, and it's done to upset one neighbour in particularly.
And it wasn't just the close neighbours who were affected.
He's been a nuisance to several of his neighbours, playing loud, heavy metal music out of his house with the windows open at all hours.
Ian's landlord soon heard about the neighbourly disputes.
I wouldn't want him as a direct neighbour for the aggro that he gives to people around him, the noise, the intimidation.
It must be a nightmare living next door to somebody like that.
Following complaints, Ian received a warning that if problems continued, he could be evicted.
Unfortunately, my landlord, he's not given me benefit of the doubt, basically sided with my neighbours.
But Ian started to get really worried when attention seemed to turn to his parents, whose house was nearby.
I was unloading my shopping from the back of my car, putting it in the porch, and they'd stopped and leaned on me little gate, cursing at me. And they moved into my big gate, and again gave me verbal abuse, shaking a fist, giving me the peace sign, and I just don't understand why.
Really unsettled my father. I ended up taking him to the police station where he made a very emotional statement, and the police were extremely concerned that now that these people were now targeting my family.
The police spoke to the culprits about the incident, but no action was taken. A few days later, Keith claims they became the target of more than just nasty words.
Came out to get in my car, and lying down here was a bag of dog poo that had been thrown at me dining room windows. The police were informed again, and I cleared the mess up, and that was it. Nothing more heard about it.
So many times I'd had the police say it was your word against theirs, and I thought, well, they're going to trip up at some point.
Desperate to catch the culprits in the act, Ian decided to take radical action.
I've bought several personal cameras to wear on my person. I bought a torch cam, visible clip-on cameras, got a tie cam, several button cams. Then in my vehicles, all my cars have car cams in.
And soon, those cameras would capture one of his neighbours.
It was an act of aggression.
Coming up, the war in Wales rages on.
This tyre had been cut and was flat as a pancake.
And the Sangs fight back.
He came limping over and asked me to tell me to stop beating him up. That's when I said to him that, it's his own fault.
In Wales, Paige Jones's father Gary had been convicted of threatening behaviour to his neighbour Joanne Dowling. But that had not been the end of things.
I've had what I assume to be dog mess on my front door.
This tyre had been cut and it was flat as a pancake.
My car's constantly scratched.
And the distance between her car and my car was no thicker than my wrist.
And my wing mirror has been ripped off I don't know how many times.
Joanne has denied everything Paige has accused her of. Paige has so far not responded to Joanne's allegations.
I have thought of moving, to be honest with you.
We have sat down and talked about selling up and moving elsewhere, but on the other hand we think, why should we move out?
I don't think I'm the neighbour from hell at all, or a difficult person to live next to. I just want a quiet life with my children.
They are the newcomers. We've been in the street all our life. Everybody knows us and gets along with us, so we shouldn't move.
In Suffolk, Ian Parker was so determined to prove he was in fact the victim of intimidation from his neighbours that he kept his car cams running whenever he left the house.
I was travelling from my parents' house about 1.5 miles up the road.
There was a car travelling behind Ian's.
They were really up close behind me, tailgating, so I was very cautious. Coming up to the roundabout, I noticed that he was indicating left to go towards Colchester, but as I turned to go to Sudbury, he suddenly turned and overtook the other side of the bollard and he cut in front of me. I was shocked at how close he come. It was just reckless. It was an act of aggression. I think it just shows that he's caught up in some personal hatred.
But when Ian showed his video to the police, they decided not to investigate the incident. One of Ian's neighbours, however, insists Ian has always been the problem.
There was one evening when I was watching television, and over the sound of the television I heard the screeching of tyres and a vehicle obviously was spinning around in the street. Looked out the window and saw that Ian had driven his vehicle at speed and lost control and ran through a neighbour's fence.
Ian admits that he backed into his neighbour's fence, but says it was an accident and he paid for the damage. He insists his neighbours will look for any reason to complain about him. But by May 2014, Ian had been trying to gather evidence that he was not the aggressor when he spotted the neighbour next door over the fence.
So I was out in my back garden and I just happened to glance in the corner of my eye. I caught him with his camcorder, so I carefully turned on my button cam.
You're filming me. You're filming me. Police.
And I walked into the house to phone the police.
Yeah, police, I think. I'm being intimidated by my neighbours.
Following a police visit, both Ian and his next door neighbour agreed not to approach or make any contact with each other. But for Ian's landlord, the problems had gone on long enough.
In summer of 2014, it all came to a head, and unfortunately I was forcibly evicted from my home.
Ian refused to be driven out of the village completely, so now lives with his parents round the corner. But for them, the nightmare is ongoing.
It's happened on 8 occasions in the last 11 months that we've been abused, and the last occasion they called Rita and me.
We haven't done anything to provoke them into doing what they're doing.
I just don't understand why it's still carrying on. I think they're sick in the head.
I was a good neighbour. I'd do anything for anybody, but some people just seem to forget that
we all have to live together.
In the West Midlands, life for the Sang family was becoming unbearable as the problem of loud music from next door got worse.
The police come out, the council served him a notice. We've had a friendly chat, we've had rows with him. He's just not listening to anybody. And it just got to the point where I'm thinking nobody can help us.
And one evening in November 2014, simmering tensions with her neighbour Nick Singh finally reached boiling point.
Around 8 o'clock, I heard the music come on.
My mum said she's had enough. When your dad comes home, you're going straight out to tell him to stop.
Just wanted it sorting out then and then.
I got back from work about 9:10. Susan came up to me, looked really upset.
So Nathan and the kids got all the, the kids got the hoodies on and everything, and they went over.
I kept banging and banging onto his door for a few minutes.
Me and my dad were swearing like mad, saying, open the damn door.
I'm just getting angry and angrier. It's just up to the level where enough is enough.
And then about maybe 5-10 minutes later, he actually comes out.
I told him turn the music off, it's really loud. And then he tried to push me away.
And that's when my dad actually took it to the next level.
And I retaliated. I just grabbed hold of him.
Fists were being thrown around.
Then he slapped onto Kieran's face.
He literally hit me here. It didn't hurt. I mean, I felt it didn't hurt. So I punched him back around here.
So in the end, I just kicked him away.
He took his jacket off and said, come on then, come at me, I'll take you all on. Jamie said, okay, bring it then, we'll all take you on.
Then we all chased up to him and grabbed hold of him.
Having heard the commotion, Susan rushed outside.
He came limping over and asked me to tell them to stop beating him up and that they can't beat him up. That's when I said to him that, it's his own fault. He shouldn't have the music on so loud.
Following the fight, Nick claims he called the police. When we spoke to him, he claimed he could have had Kieran, Jamie and Nathan arrested, but decided not to press charges.
We're not violent people, but he's made us want to be like that, do you know what I mean?
Nick has told us that since the fight, he is scared to go back to his own home and that he's had to install CCTV because he feels he's being intimidated by the Sangs. And the dispute between the two households shows no sign of ending anytime soon.
I feel like he's driving me out of my own home. And I do wonder myself whether it'll ever get solved. Who knows? Yeah, I'm just hoping it will.
Have you got a nightmare neighbour story? Get in touch at channel5.com/nightmare neighbour.
Ticking crime drama acting off her list of achievements, Kim Kardashian cementing her A-list status and kicking off celeb CSI night here on Channel 5. Stay tuned to spot her in action in CSI New York. Up next.
Loving thy neighbour is easier said than done.
If he was a slug, I would put salt round him so he explodes.
They nearly got me arrested. That's the type of noise we have to put up with.
When the garden fence marks enemy lines.
Have you got your recorder on?
It's right up there. Really?
Your home life can turn into a living hell.
Give me my dog! What do you mean of you? What the hell's the matter with you?
Coming up, a family dog is killed by next door.
Watch out, my heart's just been pulled away.
A fight over land gets nasty.
We were bullied into protecting what was ours.
I am not moving. This is my land. This is my property.
And an entire block is terrorised by one woman.
She'd had like a 20-year history of terrorising the building.
Whitehaven, a remote town on the coast of Cumbria, would appear to be the perfect place to settle and live a quiet and peaceful life. But things don't always turn out as planned.
The whole situation, total nightmare.
Past 5 years, it's been hell. I've sat and I've cried and I've cried.
Carol and Trevor Gilmore bought a rundown barn in the area that was to be their little slice of heaven.
Trevor actually fell in love with it right away. He didn't even have to go into the property itself.
You could tell the potential of the building and the panoramics. That's what really sold me on it.
But the beautiful views weren't the only thing that came with the barn. Lynn Brophy had lived next door for 18 years, and the previous owners had had long-running disputes with her in the past.
We were told not to get into any confrontation with her from the estate agents from the word go, and we didn't.
In 2009, Trevor and Carol got the keys to the barn, and as a building tradesman, Trevor wanted to be hands-on in the renovation.
Plan was to do the property up over the next couple of years as and when we could afford it, and then when it got to near completion, sell our own property and spend the equity out of that for the internal finishes.
With a mammoth task on their hands, the Gilmores started work immediately.
This building here, it was unsafe and it was derelict, so we got security fencing which ran right along to the fence.
It was up for sale, it had been ransacked, so we thought, because it was a bit semi-rural and we weren't on site all the time, we had to put CCTV up to protect the place.
The cameras covered their garden and outbuildings 24/7. But what they caught on camera were their neighbours.
Mrs. Brophy and her family dismantled part of the Harris fencing, went into the area with a strimmer and a lawnmower, and this little bit of grass here, the seamless concrete, they used to strim it. We didn't have a clue why they were engaging in such bizarre behaviour.
We laughed at first and thought she's doing a job for us. She's keeping the weeds down.
But Trevor and Carol would soon find out that providing a free gardening service was the last thing on her mind.
We were working here. Mrs. Brophy came from her house, said, "Can I have a word?" So we stopped work and started talking to her.
I did, you didn't.
Well, Trevor started talking to her, I just observed.
Trevor Gilmore was fine. He introduced himself as Trevor and he was quite nice. But Carol, she stayed standoffish. She didn't speak, she didn't say hello, she didn't say anything. And I thought, uh-oh, alarm bells started ringing, to be honest.
And it was at that point that Trevor asked her to remove her belongings from a building that was on our land.
She said no, the garage was actually owned by her. Well, according to our deeds, it was in my land.
And her answer was, well, it's in my deeds as well.
Land agency drew the deeds up wrong.
I says, I believe they're mine. I was told that they were mine. I says, and that's it at the end of the day.
Well, and I thought, we'll see. I'll sort you out.
No, you didn't.
So, on a Saturday morning, 8:30, I came up with two colleagues who works for us, my wife and my stepson, and we cleared the garage out.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing, to be honest. I couldn't. Shouted through the window, leave that stuff alone, it's mine, that building does not belong to you, get off it. They just laughed. That's all they did, was just stood there laughing.
Trevor's deeds showed that Mrs. Brophy owned less than a metre of the garage.
Then I got my still saw out, split it on the boundary, and then knocked it down with a sledgehammer. We left her with a bush shelter.
How could I stop them? How? I'd like to know how. I couldn't go up and wrestle them to the ground or anything like that.
But a few months later, Lynn Brophy dealt them another blow.
we got a letter in the post and she was claiming part of the land.
And that was the start of our nightmare.
Lynn was putting in a claim through the courts for possession of the Gilmore's entire front garden, on the grounds that she had tended to it for the last 18 years.
Started tending that land when I moved there in 1997 in summer, and I've got photographic evidence to prove that as well.
We laughed at first because we couldn't believe it, and then when we realised how serious it was, we just couldn't believe that somebody could do that.
We
You're
were
so angry.
We were bullied into protecting what was ours.
The gauntlet had been thrown, and the Gilmores had no choice but to engage a solicitor and build their case for court.
It was just paperwork, research. It was a full-time job for me. I didn't sleep. I could go for days without sleeping. It took over our lives. It took over everything. It was a 24/7
nightmare.
Coming up, a dog-loving family's worst nightmares come true.
They've both been shot.
If a dog was going to kill 120 birds, there's going to be some sort of blood round the front.
And a woman terrorises a whole block of flats.
A lot of her sort of staring into our windows.
Stupid car.
Ew.
Neighbourly disputes can be a nightmare, and for some people, police intervention is the only option for peace of mind.
She would watch from her windows. She will bang on their doors at 2 in the morning, and she will get closer and closer and menace them.
Go on, you're Ian. What are you going to do, eh?
3 years ago, Julie Reid moved into a property in a small block of 10 flats in Chesham.
My boyfriend already lived there for 6 months when I moved in. I was living in Ireland at the time. It was just to stop the long distance. It wasn't really working for us. I was aware that one of the neighbours was a little bit eccentric, as the landlord put it.
The block of flats where they were renting had a communal car park, and it was here that Julie first met her new neighbour, Judith Robinson, just 1 week after moving in.
I was going to my car, and as I was about to get in, Judith came from round behind me. It was the first time I'd officially met her.
She was very rude. She didn't introduce herself. She proceeded to tell me that I wasn't allowed to park where I was because I didn't live there. I tried to explain to her that I'd just moved in.
Julie decided it was best to avoid her neighbour, but that wouldn't be easy.
We were in bed, it was about 1 a.m, and we were woken up by the sound of the doorbell ringing, and then someone holding their finger down on the doorbell, so it was sort of continuous. We were a bit worried as to why we thought maybe it was some sort of emergency. So I think Paul was a bit surprised when he got to the door and it was just Judith standing there.
Our neighbour Judith had a high-powered torch which she shone in his face and babbled incoherently about her kitchen worktop. My boyfriend followed her round the building because he didn't understand what she was saying, and it seems that while we'd been out, a kitchen worktop had been delivered and left face down in my car parking space, and because there weren't any lights, I hadn't seen it and I parked on it without noticing. She was insisting that I should get out of my bed and move the car because I was damaging her kitchen worktop.
Julie was starting to get the idea that her neighbour was a little more than just eccentric, and used her mobile phone to start documenting some of Judith's behaviour.
If you went to the bathroom in the middle of the night and Judith was in the garden, it could be as late as sort of 2, 3 in the morning. She would sort of make howling noises. Sometimes the howling would be like screeching or saying words.
You stupid car.
Or other times it could be like wolf howling or owl noises. One time I was in the bathroom, probably about 2, 3 a.m. She started yelling, "Kill it." I'm assuming to her cat, but it was really creepy.
But it wasn't just strange noises that Julie found disturbing. When her neighbour Judith was in the garden,
There was a lot of her sort of staring into our windows. She gave us the finger quite a lot if we were in the kitchen. She'd get her torch out late at night, sort of 10, 11, and start shining it in our windows.
Julie and Paul just wanted a quiet life and tried to avoid running into their neighbour. But the car park was on shared ground.
I came down to my car one morning and found that my wiper blade had been rotated down, so it was pointing in the wrong direction.
And that wasn't all.
Happening quite regularly that when I came down to my car, the wing mirrors would have been moved, pointing completely the wrong direction that you wouldn't be able to drive with. I mean, I had pretty strong suspicions that it was more than likely Judith, because she'd been out in the garden making a lot of noise the night before. We'd been in the flat about a year, and Judith's behaviour got to the sort of annoyed us enough that we decided to phone the police. And there's a dedicated police officer at Cheshire Police that deals with her, which should have told us something. It was kind of a bit of an eye-opener, because we just thought that she was a bit of a sad old lady at that point, and actually it turned out she'd had like a 20-year history of terrorising the building.
In the last 12 years, the amount of harassment cases reported to the police has more than doubled, and PC Phil Thompson had been aware of the problems with Judith since joining the branch 3 years previously. But the one thing he was lacking was hard evidence.
Every previous victim that was being harassed by Judith had dropped out. The first time I met Julie, I had to lay it out to them. Are you going to give statements? Are you going to record what you're being exposed to? Are you willing to have CCTV? Because it's quite an involved process to be able to prove what they were telling me was going on.
Desperate to end their broken nights and get some peace, Julie and Paul agreed to do what was needed to catch Judith in the act.
We'd hoped that the CCTV camera would be a deterrent, but actually she just sort of escalated.
In Cumbria, Trevor and Carol Gilmore had bought land and a tumble-down barn with the hope of building their dream home. But it had become a bitter fight when Lynn Brophy, their only neighbour for miles, claimed she actually owned most of their property.
The only reason that we can think of to explain Mrs. Brophy's behaviour is that she's bitter that we bought the property when her family were trying to buy it.
My son and daughter-in-law had made offers on the property, and they were declined, and then they made another offer and they were declined, and they ended up making an offer of £81,000, and it was knocked back for Mr. and Mrs. Gilmore's £60,000 offer.
The previous owners had chosen not to sell to Lynn Brophy, selling instead to the Gilmores. But Lynn still wanted it, and now claimed the Gilmores' entire front garden was in fact hers. The Gilmores were now being forced to prove they owned the land, despite their deeds being clear.
The legal bills kept going up and up and up.
And Trevor's day job was suffering.
I was letting people down that I'd worked for years, and at one stage they said take time out to get yourself sorted and then come back to us.
And they were still trying to continue work on the barn whenever they had a free moment.
Mr. Gilmore knows they're not supposed to work at weekends. They can work on a Saturday till 1 o'clock and not Sundays. They worked with a digger, and I thought, I don't believe this. It's just like a builder's yard. And your house vibrates, you can feel the digger breaking the concrete.
Come on, girls!
For Lynn, living next door to the Gilmores' new home was becoming hard to bear.
I even had to have noise monitors in my house because Mrs. Gilmore had a cockerel on the front.
We had about 120 visits in a 12-month period. As I say, numerous visits off the council. Nothing was ever proved.
It got to the stage where we wanted to do something, we had to have a right good look at it and think, I wonder what problems this is going to arise. She done everything in her power to hold us up from actually renovating our property.
The court date arrived, and during the case, the previous owners of the barn rubbished Lynn's claims that she had tended the land.
The judge ruled everything in our favour. There was no land to be split, and in the verdict he said quite how Mrs. Brophy thought she would be able successfully to deceive the respondents and the adjudicator and her own lawyers, no doubt, with this crude piece of manipulation, I have no idea. Which, when we read it, made us feel so much better, because we realised that other people could see through our lies as well.
When I lost the case, I was depressed. It wasn't nice being made a liar. I can tell you now it wasn't.
Lynn was also ordered to pay the Gilmores an interim payment for their costs during the case, a total of £10,000.
Our dream was back on track. I think we went out for a meal that night and enjoyed ourselves. Didn't last long at all.
The Gilmores had beaten Lynn Brophy in court, but the relief of their success was short-lived.
Mrs. Brophy sent us a cheque.
£1.
For £1.
The countryside can seem like the perfect place for the quiet life many of us dream of. But even heaven has rules, and when you break them, all hell can break loose. In 2005, Lisa Tuttle and her family moved from a busy town to the remote village of Geldeston.
We moved here because we were in a 3-bedroom house that was pretty overcrowded because we have 5 children. This place with a massive back garden, big house, lots of room for the kids to run about in, lots of open fields, lots of walkways.
Surrounded by arable land, they could not have asked for a more idyllic surrounding to start a new life.
Couldn't have asked for a nicer place to live.
But for the kids, it took a while to feel at home.
At first you had to find friends. There weren't many friends around here, but then as the years went by, more people moved in here.
To help them settle in, Lisa bought them a dog. Ruby the Labrador was the perfect addition to a country home. Or so they thought.
Well, Ruby, she was a really gentle dog. I loved her, but she kept escaping.
But with nothing but fields surrounding them, the family thought, what harm could Ruby's roaming do? A visit from the farmer next door soon provided the answer.
He just came and knocked on the door, and he came and said, you know, your dog's getting out, she's being a problem, she's going after my pheasants. I didn't really like him. I thought he was a bit rude.
Lisa's husband James, who was asked not to be shown, was also in the house at the time.
He come to the door, I think, because the dog's got out on his land, and he said, "Is that your dog?" I said, "Yeah." Basically, he was sort of a bit angry because the dog's on his land.
I was a bit upset because I didn't want to be causing trouble with the neighbours. Went out and we done our best to try and make sure that didn't happen again. You know, I just thought that would be the end of it and we wouldn't see him again.
The family patched up their fence, but not well enough, and soon Ruby was running wild through the village again.
A few days later, the farmer came to the door again. He was really quite angry this time.
He came round, had a go at me, saying she'd been on the land, apparently killed 120 birds. And then he said, "Well, I see her on there again, I'll shoot her."
Their neighbour John Cook ran a beef and arable farm, which was home to thousands of partridges and pheasants. And the law allows farmers like him to shoot an animal if it's threatening or worrying their livestock. But Lisa and James refused to believe that Ruby could be doing any harm.
She came back and there weren't a trace on her, because she was near enough white and there was no blood or anything. But clearly if a dog was going to kill 120 birds, there's going to be some sort of blood round the front.
She was gentle. I just found it so hard to believe what he was saying was true.
Farmer John Cook demanded the family pay for the birds he said Ruby had killed. According to him, each was worth £30, which would have meant a loss of over £3,500.
But I said I wanted proof of these dead pheasants before I gave him any money. and we never heard anything from him again.
Lisa refused to pay, but knew something had to change.
I took his threat very seriously. Ruby's safety had to come first, so I had to give Ruby away. That tore me apart for about 3 or 4 months.
Kind of devastated, really. Like, really heartbroken. So I've had her for quite a long time.
Ruby had just given birth to a litter of puppies. To fill the void she left, the family decided to keep one.
I come back from school one day, and there she was, there was just a puppy, and I said I want that dog, and we kept her. I named her Marley. She was a lovely dog.
But little Marley soon took after her mum, with devastating results.
A chunk of me was gone.
Coming up, in Chesham, true colours are caught on camera.
It was fairly obvious at that point that she'd definitely keyed my car.
You must have caught the culprit by now.
And it's Paradise Lost in Cumbria.
When we bought the property, we didn't think for 1 minute we'd be living as we are now.
In Chesham, Julie Reid had moved in with her boyfriend and almost immediately began having problems with their neighbour, Judith Robinson, who'd owned a flat there for nearly 30 years.
There we go, that's Judith, leaning out of her window, taking... Oh, she's gone.
I always felt like she just really wanted you to know that she didn't want you there and that you weren't welcome, and it was very intimidating. My friends didn't like staying because they didn't like the howling in the garden and things either. It's not normal.
After a year of strange goings-on, Julie and Paul had contacted the police, only to find that their neighbour was already well known to them.
This had been going on for 20 years. It became very clear to me from the volume of different people complaining that something had to be done about it.
Judith and Paul had put up CCTV in an attempt to get enough evidence to have Judith prosecuted.
I was out in the garden putting up my washing, and Judith came out and confronted me about the camera. She was really aggressive about it, trying to say that the camera was looking into her flat, that we were spying on her. I tried to explain to her that basically we got the camera because on a few occasions my wipers and my mirrors had been tampered with. She told me this was ridiculous, no one was touching my car. As I was trying to leave the garden, she sort of got into my space, she wouldn't let me pass. And then as I was walking around the building, she came like a few steps behind me, shouting at me that I was harassing her. What was I getting out of this? Why would I want to spy on an old woman?
We have asked Judith for her version of events. She told us that she felt she was being harassed by Julie and Paul, and that the problems only started when they put up their CCTV cameras. Julie, however, was feeling more and more singled out.
No, it kind of became apparent that she really tended to focus on me more than my boyfriend. Quite often, if I was getting out of the car, she'd come round out of her flat as if she was going to speak to me, and then she'd see him and she'd about turn and go back in.
According to Phil, this was typical of the woman he had been tracking for 3 years.
My experience of dealing with Judith is that she will select the most vulnerable, typically a female that lives at this location, to target. And Julie was that person, and she got the worst from Judith.
Scared when home alone, Julie tried to get on with her life.
So I came down one morning and noticed that there was a long scratch sort of on this side of my passenger panel and along here somewhere as well, that hadn't been there the night before. So I went back upstairs and checked the CCTV, and it appeared to show Judith walking past my car, holding something shiny and sort of brushing up against it in both those places. And then a couple of nights later, she was having a rant in the garden, and she came running up to the CCTV camera, shaking her house keys and yelling that we hadn't caught the culprit yet.
You must have caught the culprit by now. What good is this? What good is this? Huh?
For PC Phil, this was the sort of evidence he'd been waiting for.
You could see her on camera go over and inspect her handiwork from where the vehicle had been damaged. To me, she was taunting them and trying to seek out confrontation.
Julie and Paul's CCTV was going 24/7. But the constant taunts were also being recorded on Julie's phone.
Come on. Here I am. What are you going to do, eh? What are you going to do, eh?
There were occasions where she'd just shout wipers, mirrors, in sort of a really shrill, it's a really freaky voice that she used.
Wipers, mirrors, and
I think she just wanted to upset me more than anything else.
for me to prove what was going on, that was key.
PC Thompson was looking forward to making an arrest, but would he have enough evidence to convict Judith of harassment? In Norfolk, the Tuttle family rehomed their troublesome dog Ruby when their neighbour John Cook threatened to shoot her for allegedly killing 120 of his birds. To make up for her loss, the family kept one of her puppies, which they called Marley.
I used to let Marley hit off her lead, so she used to go in the river. She used to slide down this slope here and jump in and have a little swim about. She used to love it. She used to just come near you and then shake all the water off near you. You're like, Marley, no. Marley was mainly my dog. Fed her, paid for her food sometimes. Yeah.
But as Marley grew up, it became clear she'd inherited her mother Ruby's adventurous spirit.
Her only flaw was escaping. She just liked to get out and run about outside.
Despite Marley regularly running wild in the surrounding fields, in 2013, James and Lisa saw no harm in getting 2 more dogs, Lily and Bella.
Me and Dad done this because they kept digging under the hedge and getting out. This originally wasn't here. This bit worked, but not that bit. There's a big hole there where they can get out, but in the hedge.
Despite the patchwork of wood, metal and wire, the dogs repeatedly escaped onto their neighbour's land.
Sometimes I spot them and they're all together and Marley sprints off and then Bella goes second and Lily's last, so they all used to follow each other.
But Lisa and James say they received no complaints from any of their neighbours during this period. And in August 2014, the Tuttle family left on a long-awaited holiday.
We'd saved quite hard for this and we were all looking forward to it. We didn't take the dogs because the car's just big enough to fit the kids in.
Lisa left her mom and sister to watch over the animals. But 3 days into their trip away, she got a phone call.
I answered it. It was my mum. She said that the farmer had put a complaint in about Lily and Marley because they'd been on his land. Well, that was a shock because I hadn't had any run-ins with this farmer since what had happened with Ruby, so I did initially start to panic.
The police wanted to speak to Lisa when she returned about ways of keeping the dogs from escaping. Lisa thought everything was under control, but the next day,
Mum got a phone call and she went outside. I kind of got the feeling that Marley was like suffering about the dogs.
It was Lisa's sister. The dogs had escaped again, and this time the workers on the farm had seen them.
She said that they'd both been shot. They're dead. It was like a dream.
A chunk of me was gone. Well, a chunk of my heart's just been pulled away.
Gutted. Totally gutted. Just totally devastated.
According to the farmer, the dogs had smashed their way into a pen full of his birds and slaughtered them, giving his gamekeeper more than enough grounds to destroy them under UK law. Bella, the only surviving dog, returned home with a dead bird in her mouth, which Lisa has since kept in the freezer.
As you can see, it hadn't got a tooth mark in it and it's fairly whole. Even got the feathers all still there. I don't think she had any intentions of ripping it up or trying to eat it.
John Cook insists the shooting of the 2 dogs was lawful, and so far no charges have been brought against his gamekeeper or the Tuttles. But the family's simple life in the country has now changed forever.
I'm on antidepressants now. I don't even want to live round here anymore. Everywhere we go round here, there's reminders of what he's done and what he's taken away from us.
Trevor and Carol Gilmore had fought and won a battle over ownership of their entire front garden with next-door neighbour Lynn Brophy.
Everything's ruled in our favour. Everything. There isn't nothing that is ruled in our favour.
But she doesn't give up.
No, she never gives up.
Lynn Brophy had been ordered to pay the Gilmores £10,000, but she was still convinced she had a case.
I can prove that from when I moved there, I saw to them buildings and cut the grass. Well, not me personally, but my family. We've always used them, and that plus that they belong to me.
Lynn appealed to the High Court, but this time she was on her own.
My solicitor wasn't prepared to support me because I had outstanding fees with him.
With the battle still ongoing, and with no payment from Lynn, the Gilmores were now at financial breaking point.
We couldn't keep absorbing all the legal fees that we were faced with.
There was no money left at all to do anything, which was just... the dream had gone.
And after over 2 years of litigation, they were faced with a harsh reality.
The drastic action we had to take was to sell my property that we owned in Whitehaven.
And what we were left with was the shell of a building, living in a caravan. One big problem I have is...
where to put stuff.
Shut up talking! Everything's just squashed everywhere.
Compact and bijou, it's just...
But finally, the end looked in sight when Lynn's appeal went to court.
Went in front of the judge, and even though he says you have to point errors of law out, well, I only had errors of fact, and I lost it on those grounds.
Lynn had nowhere else to take her appeal. She still owed the Gilmores £10,000, and 10 months later, they got a cheque through the post.
£1.
Or £1. Via recorded delivery, which cost more than what the cheque was made out for.
I did send them a cheque for £1, but it was a nominal payment, so they couldn't say that I hadn't paid anything.
That started another court procedure to get the money back.
The Gilmores eventually won a court order for Lynn to pay them £100 a month until the debt is paid.
Well, £100's a lot of money at the end of the day. It is a lot of money. I do struggle to pay £100 a month. But rather than giving them the benefit of the doubt and making me bankrupt, no, I'll pay it.
But just days after the order, trouble erupted yet again. When the Gilmores employed workmen to mark out a new boundary fence along the back of their property, Mrs. Brophy and her family came out in force, and Carol got it all on camera.
They knocked the string line down, come onto our land, the other side.
Miss Gilmore ripped my hedging out. That was on my land. I thought, I'm not having this, no, not on my land.
And then while Trevor was working, Mrs. Brophy actually got in the hole that the post was going to go in to stop him working.
And I phoned the police to say that they were trespassing on my land and that I was not going to move out this hole. I said, no matter how cold it is, how late it is, whether it rains, I am not moving. This is my land, this is my property, and that's it.
The police asked Trevor and Carol to stop work on the fence until the matter could be resolved.
I was so disgusted, I just went back into the caravan and I stayed in there because I'd just had enough.
But Trevor wasn't going down without a fight.
He said, I could play this game all day.
Coming up, the war over land continues in Cumbria.
No one will beat me.
And things reach boiling point in Chesham.
You could see it on her face that this time she was in trouble.
In rural Cumbria, Trevor and Carol Gilmore had been battling over land with their neighbour Lynn Brophy for 5 years.
For somebody to be so nasty to other people is a sad way to live your life.
Lynn was staging a protest against the Gilmores, putting a fence up on their boundary.
I ushered the police and them off my land and said, this is my land and it's not Mrs. Brophy's, so I'm sorry, you'll have to leave.
After a full review, police told Lynn that the Gilmores were within their rights to build the fence, and if she interfered with it again, she'd be breaking the law.
I don't like the woman. I would never like to meet the woman ever again in my life, and I wish she would just sell up, move on, and get out of my life.
I have sat there and felt like just packing my bags and going. Sometimes I hate going back there because I know they're there. And I've cried, and I've cried, and I've cried, and there's probably still more tears. I actually thought, how much more can I take?
Following the multiple court hearings, the Gilmores' legal costs have increased to £25,000. Now with interest, Lynn owes them nearer £30,000.
We don't bank on Mrs. Brophy ever paying the debt off unless she comes to sell a house. And in all honesty, that is the bitterest pill for us to swallow.
But despite it all, the Gilmores still have their dreams.
This room is going to be what is eventually, hopefully, going to be our bedroom. But hopefully,
this year, 2015, we shall be living in it.
This room will be the main bathroom. Yeah, with a bit of luck. Fingers crossed.
Come on, let's go.
But Lynn is still adamant.
I intend to fight tooth and nail. The boundary line was drawn wrong, incorrectly, and I will try and get a rectification of the deeds, either that or the decision overturned. And I will win that, I know I will. I've had cancer, I've beat cancer, and no one will beat me. Nobody. Cancer can't beat me, nobody will.
In Chesham, Julie Reid and her partner Paul were feeling harassed by their neighbour Judith Robinson. With the help of the police, they were trying to obtain enough evidence to get her prosecuted.
At that time we were kind of having to phone the police emergency line sort of every other day, sometimes twice a day. There was pretty much every day there was something.
But things were about to reach boiling point.
One evening when Judith was outside in the garden, and I went to go to the bathroom, but when I turned my bathroom light on, she sort of came over to underneath the window and started shouting abuse at one point she threatened that her lodger was going to be there the next day, and when he found out about this, that I'd be sorry. So it just really didn't make me feel very safe in the property anymore.
This threat was enough for the police to finally make a move.
There was about 8 or 9 police officers, I think, in 4 vans. Comforting to know that they did take it as seriously, because it's not a major crime at the end of the day, but it is something that had quite a severe effect on not just our lives, but like all of the residents.
For PC Thompson, the arrest was the culmination of years of hard work.
We had a lot of conversations over the years. I'd laid out the law to her quite firmly that this had to stop. It was going to end this way eventually. And she was very arrogant, very cocky. She'd make spurious complaints and carry on offending. And the day that I walked into her house to finally arrest her, you could see it on her face that this time she was in trouble. So on the day of the arrest, when I was the last person to leave, and as I left, all the other residents from the block at that time congregated on this corner and gave me a standing ovation for taking her away.
Judith pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of harassment and 1 of criminal damage for scratching Julie's car. The CCTV footage and audio clips Paul and Julie had recorded were used as evidence.
The footage shown in court speaks for itself. There is virtually nothing Judith could have said to get out of what she'd done.
Judith was found guilty of all charges and she was fined £500, given a 9-week suspended sentence, and Julie won a restraining order preventing Judith from contacting or harassing her. Judith declined to take part in this film, but she insists that she is innocent of all charges. Paul and Julie have now moved away from the area.
It's really nice just not being able to go outside and not have to worry about who's watching you or about getting abuse shouted at you. It's good.
She is a very, very nasty, horrible person, and that comes across quite clearly. If you had to live beside that, you would not last. You would be moving as soon as possible.
Have you got a nightmare neighbour story? Get in touch at channel5.com/nightmare neighbour. Next time, a pensioner gets violent.
If he was a slug, I would put salt round him so he explodes.
A veteran tackles the police next door.
I picked up this and swung it.
And the nightmare building extension.
The gap between our property and his is like inches.
Over on 5 USA next, justice is served in the Windy City in the Season 2 premiere of Chicago PD. Here on Channel 5, Brazen Britain season continues with outrageous oldies blowing the lot and behaving badly in new 24-hour party pensioners.